Welcome to AARP Connecticut in your community. Hi, I'm Elaine Werner. I am your host for today's program. I'm on staff with the AARP Connecticut nonprofit statewide office, where we do advocacy and community outreach. We come to you in your local community with AARP's purpose in mind, and that is to empower you to choose how you live as you age. We hope that we will empower you greatly today on an issue that we're all concerned about, our pocketbooks and what we spend. And the focus today is going to be on the high cost of utilities right here in Connecticut. Whatever age you are, if you pay an electricity bill in Connecticut, this is a show that's important to you. So we want to empower you today, the ratepayer, educate you with the right information so that you can investigate your electricity supplier options. I always like to bring the experts to the show, and I am bringing one today. I would like to welcome John Erlinghauser. John is the ARP Connecticut Associate State Director for Advocacy and Outreach. And I guess I have to say, welcome back, John. Nice to have you.
Nice to be with you, and I look forward to the discussion.
And John, I have, as your colleague, John is on staff also for the ARP Connecticut statewide nonprofit office. Again, he's the Associate State Director for Advocacy and Outreach. And John, I have seen you in action over almost 9 years, my time with ARP Connecticut. You are tireless, you are committed, you are a passionate advocate for critical consumer issues for Connecticut, and particularly the high cost of utilities. So first, if we can start, John, again, being that you're the point person on utilities for the ARP nonprofit office, why is this subject important to AARP?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Elaine, and I appreciate
Sure.
the introduction. And this is just a very, very important issue for ARP. It's something we've been working on since my time at ARP, which is now just coming up on 17 years. And we do because in the state of Connecticut, we pay the highest electric rates in the continental U.S. We have a deregulated electric market for the last 20 or so years. And as a result of having a deregulated electric market, residential and commercial customers, but primarily residential customers, have a lot of choices they need to make or not make, depending on what their situation is. And because there are so many choices out there, there are a lot of unscrupulous players in the market as it relates to individual residences and their electric choices. And we see a lot of people that end up either getting ripped off because of the unscrupulous practices of some third-party electric suppliers, or they're just not educated enough with the proper tools and information to know how to make the right choices for them, and they end up paying more for electricity. And when you're already paying, even at baseline, the highest rates in the country, we hate to see people get ripped off and pay more for electricity. So we've taken an active role in electric issues and other utilities, particularly electric, both before the PURA, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, and the legislature, and with our community outreach program, educating the public about what their choices are and how to make them properly. So it's right at the heart of the work we do at AARP, and we feel we're doing as good a public service as anybody could do on this issue. And quite frankly, before we did, there was a void on this area from a consumer perspective. There are certainly folks out there that work on this issue. We have the Office of Consumer Counsel, a ratepayer funded advocate on behalf of those issues, and other groups, but there was no real big organization or consumer advocacy group that went in and worked on these issues. So AARP rightfully stood up and took on that cause.
Well, and we want to thank you, John, for your expertise and your passion again for the subject, for filling that void, that you're being vigilant and you're advocating on behalf of the consumer. I said this show is for any age, but, retired people may be using more electricity just by the fact that they may be at home more often than others. But again, this show and the information that we're giving you is important to any age person. By the way, the title of the show today, Saving Money, Navigating Electricity in Connecticut's Deregulated Market. And John, you alluded to the fact that Connecticut's utility rates are some of the highest in the nation. Why is that? I'm always curious about that.
Well, I mean, Elaine, it's a good question, and there are a multitude of reasons. One of them is just simply that because we're an old state, physically, we have an old infrastructure,
Mm.
and it takes a lot to maintain the infrastructure in Connecticut as it relates to electricity. We have the old telephone poles and wires above ground and things like that. We have a reliance on natural gas to generate electricity, and all the expenses that go along with that. We have the state requiring a certain percentage, a high percentage, much higher than other states, requires of our electricity to be generated by um, environmentally safe and sound generation sources like solar and wind. Things that are newer technologies cost a lot more. There are many mandates that the state legislature puts on your electric bills, and the federal government charges that are on your bills that are, no matter what happens, you can't do anything about them. So it's a combination of a lot of things that are why we pay the highest electric rates in the country. But then when we talk about third-party electric suppliers and the choices people made, then there are folks that either get ripped off or make bad decisions because they don't have the proper information, and then they end up paying even more than they would have to. And as I said, even at baseline, we do pay just about the highest rates in the continental U.S. So a multitude of choices, a multitude of reasons. A lot of them is public policy. Some of it's good public policy. But on the other hand, a lot of times, the road to, damnation is paved with good intentions and good, supposed public policy. And so, our role is to make sure that all the policies that the state enacts, whether it's at the legislature or at the regulators, not only takes into account, environmental goals and things like that, because those are admirable and just things, but we also have to take into account how it's going to impact everyday ratepayers, whether they're over the age of 50 or not, but primarily those that are on a fixed income of all ages, because as I say, your income might not rise, but certainly your utilities are continuing to rise. And when you think about where we are in 2020 and 2021 in a pandemic, and financial hardship that people are going through, it's a big impact. And utilities, high cost of utilities plays a large role in that financial impact on people's lives. So,
Well, thanks for the background on that, John. And, whether in a pandemic, depending on when you're watching this particular program or not, of course, the cost of utilities in Connecticut is always high, sometimes higher than not, depending on how much you are using as well. But that background is appreciated. Speaking of background and history, John, my understanding is that about 20 years ago, Connecticut restructured the electricity market with hopes of lowering rates. Can you give us a little bit of that history of what we hope to accomplish by doing that?
right. So, excellent question. Connecticut is one of about 15 states that restructured, deregulated electricity back, about 20 years ago. And, I could start off by saying, I believe and ARP believes it was a big mistake. We discourage other states from doing it. We encourage states like Connecticut to put as many bumpers or railings around the regulated market as possible in the form of consumer protections because of all the problems that have existed in the market. But what it actually meant was when we deregulated with several things. So in the old days, Eversource and United Illuminating, or the old Eversource was the old Connecticut Lane Power, now it's Eversource and United Illuminating, were the only game in town depending on where you live. So about 80% of the state is serviced by Eversource and about 20% by United Illuminating, and they did everything. They generated the electricity in their power plants that they owned. They transmitted it through the wires and maintained those wires, and then provided you the supply of the actual electricity. So they were the whole game in town. It was regulated by, the fact that they got expenses and a reasonable rate of return determined by regulators over and above their expenses, and that's how they made a profit. But it was regulated, and it all happened before regulators. Now, today, it's much different. The electric generation plants are owned by private companies. They're totally for-profit companies that compete in the marketplace, primarily the financial marketplace, to sell their electricity. And the UI and Eversource, the electric distribution companies, now are just in charge of bringing you the electricity from where it's generated from private companies through the wires into your home, and the state companies, Eversource and UI, maintain that whole infrastructure, that transmission infrastructure. And then you can get your electricity in one of two ways: from UI and Eversource, which is a standard default option. Those companies make no profit on it because they're not allowed to. They acquire it in conjunction with the state of Connecticut for their customers. You can take it or not. And then now what's new is you can also get electricity from a private company. So your supply generation can be bought through a third party to kind of, either save money or get some kind of other deal. Some people want to pay more for their electricity because they want an all green option, and as I say, the more green and environmentally friendly the option is, the more cost is there. So right now you have those three areas, and it's kind of all split up. So on one hand, it sounds great because there's market competition for generation and for supply. But on the other hand, those are all private companies, and the state has just a very limited ability to have oversight over them because they're private companies. When it was vertically integrated, the state had all the authority over what the expenditures and the profits could be, but now it's completely different. So, that's why it's important for folks to have as much knowledge as possible, because when we're in this kind of marketplace, folks are on the hook for their choices. And so it's great to have choice, but without information, choice could be very costly when you're talking about something like utilities. So, that's kind of what we did. And I will just reiterate that not a single state, since those first 15 states deregulated, has deregulated their market since then. I think the consensus has been pretty much so that it has not been beneficial for ratepayers, and it hasn't simplified things. It's actually confused things quite a bit for people. So, that's kind of the deregulated market in a nutshell.
Thanks, John, again for that perspective. And we're going to get into the tips and the caveats for our viewers on the various electric suppliers. But let's start first and with two words: standard offer. And you've said to me before, and to our members and residents of Connecticut, you never really have to switch to a supplier. You can stay on the standard offer. But for those viewers who don't know what the standard offer is, if you could define that, please, John.
Yeah, it's relatively simple. So, when state restructured and deregulated, as with all deregulated state, actually every deregulated state has a standard offer except one, and that's in Texas. So the parts of Texas that are deregulated are completely marketplace. You must choose a third party to be a supplier. All the other states, 14 of them, including Connecticut, is this default service that's automatic. So the minute you move into a residence and you sign up for electricity, you're by default on the standard service. And that is the service that is provided to you through your electric distribution company, whether it's Eversource and United Illuminating, depending on where you live. And it's in Connecticut, we've worked very hard to make sure that standard offer is just that. It's standard, it's easy to understand, and it's very competitive. And it becomes what we say is not only the default service, but the baseline service by which all other offers are to be effectively measured against. It's very competitive in Connecticut. We have one of the most competitive standard offers. It's something that has the same term and rate every 6 months. So from January to June, that whole 6 months, what it's going to cost. There are not going to be any surprises or question marks about it. And then from July to December, you're going to know the same thing. It'll probably be different over those 2 6-month periods, but that it's going to be the same rate for 6 months, and that the terms cannot change. What's interesting about it also is that Eversource and United Illuminating, they don't care whether you take standard service or not, because I said earlier in the program, they make no money off of it. They're not allowed to, because under the state law, under deregulation, they can only distribute the electricity and they maintain the poles and wires. So they, with the state as an overseer, procure that electricity for their customers who take standard service, and you pay whatever they pay to acquire it from the market. And so it's just a pass-through charge. So, if you say you want to go choose a third party, they're like, fine. In fact, in many instances, they'll give you the information as to where to go to how to make those decisions. Now, what's interesting is about 2/3 of the people in the state of Connecticut actually do not choose a third-party supplier. They stay with standard service, mostly because of the complexities of the market, the problems folks have had over the course of the last 10 or 15 years with third-party electric suppliers, and because of all the work that ARP and other consumers have done to make the standard service so attractive and competitive that it's almost not worth it for many people to switch from that. So that's what the standard service is. It's a good, safe, reliable bet. And, we could talk in a bit about, whether, what kinds of people should or should not go into the market or versus stay with the standard.
Right, important definition, and thank you for that on the standard offer. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, the name of our show today is Save Money, Navigating Electricity in Connecticut's Deregulated Market. I'm Elaine Werner, on staff with ARP Connecticut Nonprofit Office. My host today is John Erlinghauser. He is the point person on utilities for AARP Connecticut in his role as Advocacy and Outreach Director. And John, so let's talk about some tips and caveats for electric suppliers. I know one of my first questions is, and thank you, you're always my go-to person because I have electric heat, which I'm not, so I'm always watching my bill more carefully, particularly given your expertise and advice. So let's talk about who should be the one that might want to look at third party and kilowatt hours and usage and type of electricity that people have. Is that all part of it?
Yeah, I mean, so we offer, one of the biggest tips that we offer folks about whether or not they should go into the market is the number 750. And what does that mean? Why 750? Well, the state of Connecticut has determined that the average usage for a residential home in Connecticut is 750 kilowatt hours a month. That's the average. Some people use a lot more, like yourself. If you have an all-electric home, chances are you could be using 2,000 to 3,000. I know people who use 5,000 kilowatt hours a month. And then there are others like me who use very little. I use, 200 to 300 kilowatt hours a month. There are many folks that are older who use a lot less because they don't have all the people in the home using all kinds of appliances and iPods and computers and things like that all day. And so what we say to folks now, we never tell you to or not go into a market, but we often say, if you're using less than 750 kilowatt hours a month, you might want to just stay with the standard service because all you're really looking at is a penny or two usually of savings per kilowatt hour. And it's only on your supply, which is the smaller portion of your bill. So most instances, you're looking at $1 or $2 a month. And over the course of a year, $10, $15, $20. Some people say, well, but even that's something. Well, here's the problem. What we find is that the majority of people in the state of Connecticut who choose a third-party supplier over the course of their entire contract arrangement end up paying more than if they stayed with the standard service for a whole host of reasons, and we can get into that. So, we often say the risk far outweighs the reward. So, for the potential of saving $10, you could end up costing you $20 or $30 a month more than the standard service. Now, if you're using more than 750 kilowatt hours, that's when we say, okay, get the information you need, make an informed, educated decision. If you choose to go in there, make sure you monitor things because there might be some savings to be made. Because now you're talking about a lot of generation supply, and you could end up saving $20, $30 a month. That's a little bit more of a substantial amount of savings. But then that's where you need the tools to stay in the market. So 750 kilowatt hours, that's a good number to look at, to help you make a decision about whether you go in or don't go into the market.
And John, thank you for that benchmark. So if you're over 750 kilowatt hours per month, we want to lead you to a website where you can kind of shop and get educated on the various suppliers. That's www.energizect.com. We will put that up on the screen. And John, I'm just going to throw some maybe in some cases unscrupulous tactics that may
Sure.
exist so that our viewer can be aware of the caveats. So, and if you can briefly just address each. Variable rates.
Right. So Connecticut, so one of the reasons so many people in the past were getting ripped off was because they would unknowingly get into a variable rate contract. They would get into a contract that was a certain price for, let's say, 4 months. But at the end of the 4 months, if they didn't do something, that contract would automatically go to a month-to-month variable rate. And a lot of times those rates were going up 2 or 3 times which originally went into. And so Connecticut banned variable rate contracts. We AARP worked very, very hard in getting those variable rates banned. But what that means now is that a variable rate is any contracts whose term is not at least 4 months in duration. So it's very important that you know that you can't have your rate change in a contract unless it's after 4 months. The funny thing now is what the state is allowing suppliers to do is get into what they call a fixed tiered contract, which means you could be in a contract that's a year in duration. You know the terms up front, but it could be for one rate for 4 months, another rate for 4 months, and a third rate for the next 4 months. And the problem with that is, remember we said earlier, your benchmark is that standard offer from January to June, July to December. So you may be making a good deal in the first 4 months of that contract, and it may even be good for the next 2 months of the second year of that contract. But for the second half of that year and for the next 4 months, you may lose more money than you saved the first half of the term. So it's very important to know we ban variable rates. There's such a thing as fixed tiered contracts, which is in essence a variable rate by another name. But at least you can get into a 4-month contract if you want and know that it'll never change. So important thing to know, and that's we have one of the strongest protections on that.
And another caveat I'm just going to throw out again, enrollment charges.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bad thing too. So one of the other things, as I say, every time we come up with a bumper or a guardrail around a bad practice, suppliers figure their way around how to kind of bypass that and still get their money. So once we did a lot of things like ban variable rate contracts and such, and cap cancellation fees, people have now started with what they call an enrollment fee. They'll charge you a sum of money up front to get the best rate that they'll offer, which sometimes is several pennies cheaper than the standard service. And that may sound great. And actually, you might even be able to save money, particularly for somebody like yourself, Elaine, who uses a lot of electricity in an all-electric home. You might be able to save money. But what we tell people is never pay for the electricity up front for a whole host of reasons. You don't know how much electricity you're going to use. You may have a change in life circumstances that you may use a lot less. A company may go out of business. And, the bond that they have with the state of Connecticut might not be enough to have you recoup all the money you put up front. It's never a good idea to pay an enrollment fee or any kind of fee that's not explicitly spelled out in the rate itself. So I would say never to get involved in enrollment fees.
And John, there's more caveats to talk about, but again, I'm going to direct our viewer to a website where they can become more educated, www.energizect.com. John Erlinghauser is on staff with ARP Connecticut. We're going to put his information up on the screen too. Need to call him directly or me as well, Elaine Warner. John, not a lot of time left, but I do want to mention some of the organizations that we have partnered with on this important subject, the high cost of utilities in Connecticut, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, the Connecticut Office of the Consumer Counsel, and the Attorney General's Office. If you can just briefly touch on our relationship and how we've worked together, John.
Yes, so Pura is the one who oversees a lot of the things that we've talked about, and so we work very closely with them, sometimes as a partner, sometimes before them as a party representing ratepayers, and their job is to oversee everything. The Consumer Counsel
and right now Connecticut has an acting consumer council, but it's an office that's ratepayer funded to advocate before regulators on behalf of residents. We work very closely with the Office of Consumer Counsel under the statute. They automatically have a standing in all cases before regulators on behalf of ratepayers, and the Attorney General's office, Attorney General Pong's office, has standing statutorily before regulators on all rate cases. So, we work very closely with them, sometimes legislatively, sometimes before regulators, sometimes in conjunction with regulators. It all depends on the type of proceeding. And I do want to make clear for folks, I know we're running low on time, but that website, that www.energizect.com website, that's the state's official rate board. That's where ratepayers are funding that rate board. The state of Connecticut regulators oversee it. It's the only place that people should go. Any information about how to choose a supplier, how to choose solar. Never get your information from door-to-door salesmen or from third-party electric suppliers that call you on the telephone or from a flyer you get in the mail. Always go to that rate board. That's the only safe, clean, and honest place to get information. And I would, if we say it once, we could say it 1,000 times. That's one of the most important things to stress.
And thank you, John. Really terrific information. I know we're throwing a lot at you, the viewer, but hopefully this is important information where you can have your electricity bill be more affordable. Do want to mention also, if you go to our website, www.arp.org/CT, we do have a program called What I Need to Know About My Electric Choices. It is mostly volunteer led. John's helped support and train a lot of our volunteers to, again, have you bring your electricity bill to the show. It's virtual at the moment, and we've had people walk away from it saying that they've saved a lot of money. John, I hate always so much more when I talk to you to learn, but I want to thank you again for letting our viewer know, hopefully with the title of the show, Save Money. John has helped us navigate electricity in Connecticut's deregulated market, and you'll have our information on the screen if you need more information. John, always appreciate your knowledge, and certainly personally, you've helped me very much in my own utility bill, so appreciate that very much. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure indeed. So hope we've empowered you today with looking at your electricity bill with more scrutiny. If you're interested in volunteering with us on this subject or any other, I'm Elaine Werner, Program Specialist for Volunteer Engagement with ARP Connecticut. You can reach me at 860-548-3169. Hope to come back to you soon in your local community. Thanks for watching today, and see you soon. Thanks.